ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hi, I'm here today with Anders Folk for another edition of the Better Minneapolis podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So you're running for Hennepin County Attorney. Why don't we begin by just maybe you could fill people in a little bit about yourself, even where you're from. People love to talk about how long they've lived in Minnesota and where they were born and all that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks. My name's Anders Folk. I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney. I'm running because I think it's time for a change in that office, and I'm running to make public safety a priority for that office again. I am a lifelong Minnesotan. I grew up in Hopkins, the raspberry capital of the world, self-proclaimed. And grew up going to the Raspberry Day Parade every year, went to Hopkins High School, and then stuck around for college and law school. I went to the University of Minnesota as an undergrad. Was lucky enough to get a lot of help from the school to pay my way through, and then went to the law school at the University of Minnesota as well, so I'm a double golden gopher, and joined the Marine Corps in law school, and that was my first full-time job out of law school was as a Marine Corps judge advocate. And other than my time away in the Marine Corps, I've lived here my whole life. Spent time in the Department of Justice as a federal prosecutor. Spent time practicing law privately, and going to bring to bear kind of all of that prosecution and trial experience to the role of the Hennepin County Attorney.
Okay. So you've had the opportunity to actually be in the courtroom and prosecute some big trials, I guess, if you were on the federal level.
Yeah. I've been. I tell everybody I feel like I've been blessed with this really fun career and have gotten to do really interesting, important cases that made me a better lawyer, but also I feel like were really important to public safety and just to making sure we were holding people accountable when they got on the wrong side of the law. But yeah, I'll tell you, when I was a young judge advocate in the Marine Corps, I defended Marines and sailors under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I prosecuted Marines and sailors under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And, that was really where I got my start. And it was kind of everything you would imagine in the world of criminal justice, some uniquely military offenses, and then some kind of cases that look a lot like what you might see at Hennepin County or at a U.S. Attorney's office. And then at the U.S. Attorney's office here as a federal prosecutor, I was lucky enough to prosecute, I think, kind of every type of case you can imagine, from large white-collar fraud cases to counterterrorism cases, domestic and international, to things like large gang cases involving what I would say kind of international or national gangs who were trafficking guns and drugs in the Twin Cities and really hurting our public. And so I've been blessed with a career where I've gotten to do really challenging, hard, but important cases that I think made a difference. So
this is a little bit off topic, but the fact that you did the military work made me think about, it's an issue right now, especially with these boats getting bombed in Venezuela, like this question about what happens to soldiers if they, say, fulfill a command that's against the law. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I'll tell you, when I was in the Marine Corps on active duty, we had troops deployed in Iraq, we had troops deployed in Afghanistan, and we were struggling with these issues, and I was representing Marines and sailors who were, in some instances, being investigated or prosecuted for crimes that had originated out of these combat zones, and also prosecuting folks who were involved in these kinds of cases. And so, I think, for starters, the President of the United States is the commander-in-chief and makes these kinds of decisions, and frankly owes the U.S. public an explanation for what the lawful authority is to carry out these strikes. And I think it's completely unfair for any service member to ever have any concerns about the legality of an order they're receiving from their commander-in-chief. And so, to me, priority one is for the president as commander-in-chief to provide a clear legal explanation for these strikes. And I think as a Marine who understands what a lawful order is and who understands the kind of sacred obligation that military leadership has to the troops, that they all deserve a very clear explanation for the orders that they're being given, especially in a circumstance like this where never before in our history has the United States targeted alleged drug traffickers with missile strikes like this.
Yeah. It's one of many of the unique obstacles or, I guess, situations.
To say the least.
Well, but to get back on topic with this particular office, it attracts its own controversy.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, you've mentioned, I guess, on your website how you want to bring trust back to the office. What do you think the reputation of the Hennepin County Attorney's office is right now? And what do you think needs to change about that?
Yeah, I think the reputation right now has been hurt, and I think it's one of the reasons that I've been most compelled to get into this race. Mm-hmm. I didn't mention this before, but my first job in the criminal justice system was as a law clerk working at the Hennepin County Attorney's office in their juvenile prosecution division. This is back in the kind of early 2000s, I guess, right after I got back from officer candidate school in the Marine Corps. And my experience there was that it is filled with hardworking, dedicated public servants who care deeply about making all of us safer every day. And I know there's still a core of really committed prosecutors in that office, committed to justice now, just like there were then. And one of the things that I really felt proud of as a young law clerk working in that office was the great reputation that all the attorneys in that office had, whether they were with the bench, with the judges, whether it's with probation officers, whether it's with law enforcement, whether it's with faith leaders, educators, kind of all the people in that public safety ecosystem. That was one of those things that just made you hold your head up high because you felt proud to be in the presence of these really hardworking public servants. And I'm really afraid that the office in the eyes of the public over the last few years has taken a hit. And, I think some of that comes from the office not working well with law enforcement. I think some of that comes from the office not communicating with members of the public. And I think it comes with a real shift in the priorities of that office. And so I do think its reputation has taken a hit. When I read in the paper or when I hear from people that, the chief of police in Minneapolis and the county attorney don't talk to one another, that tells me there's a problem in the county attorney's office and we got to fix it.
Yeah, it seems like there's been some public sparring between them over what charges to bring and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And, I tell everybody, it's not like prosecutors and law enforcement walk in lockstep. I mean, a good prosecutor is an independent person who follows the fact and applies the law and treats every case on its merits, without fear or favor. You don't worry about, is this a powerful defendant I'm prosecuting? You do the right thing in every case. And I think part of being that good prosecutor is having the judgment and the wherewithal at times to disagree with law enforcement. And law enforcement and prosecutors may not always see every issue eye to eye, but at the end of the day, you can disagree with mutual respect and with kind of a history of communicating and understanding and actually explaining why it is you might disagree. And I think that's been lost. And I know that I can bring back that kind of teamwork and that mutual respect and understanding that I think unfortunately is lost right now.
There's a couple of things I should have asked at the beginning, I guess. I didn't. Do you consider yourself DFL?
Yeah.
Is that,
yeah.
Okay.
No, that's a great question. I
sometimes I make that assumption, and I just thought I would.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you asked. I grew up a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my whole life. I consider myself a really kind of pragmatic Democrat in the mold of a Senator Klobuchar or an Andy Lugar, who's endorsed me in this race. And, this is a nonpartisan race, and I think that's important.
Sure, they all are.
Yeah, right. Well, and this truly is, and criminal justice, we make charging decisions not based on whether the person we're charging believes X or Y. We make charging decisions based on, the facts, and we apply the law. And so I think that's important. But I've been a Democrat my whole life. I, have very fond memories of watching Bill Clinton early in my kind of teenage years. And actually one of the kind of really searing moments in my life in a positive way, in high school, was lucky enough to get to go to this thing called Boys Nation. It's sponsored by the American Legion, and I got a chance to meet President Clinton. I got a chance to meet my congressman at the time, Jim Ramstad. I got a chance to meet Paul Wellstone, Senator Durenberger, the whole Minnesota kind of congressional delegation that related to where I lived in Hopkins. And it was just awesome. And, that experience of meeting President Clinton and as a young Democrat at the time, kind of hearing his kind of origin story, it left a real mark on me. And, part of that experience is what motivated me to serve and to be involved in public service, just because seeing people like Senator Wellstone, Congressman Ramstad, President Clinton, it really let you see how people could make a difference for good.
Yeah.
And that felt good. And it made me proud as a Minnesotan to see these folks.
Well, it seems like there was a lot of momentum behind Mary Moriarty when she took office, and a lot of that was kind of a reaction to the murder of George Floyd and people wanting to see a different attitude towards prosecution and criminals. And this is going to be a question, so I'll
go for it. I like the setup.
And so, but it feels a little bit like people have gotten impatient maybe with her approach, and a lot of her approach seems to focus on youth and more the pre-diversion things. I read recently how she thinks the recidivism rate has gone down with some of the pre-diversion track for youth, not sending them just through the traditional courts and stuff like that. But I think from what I hear from a lot of listeners and people is they're just frustrated watching, say, youth steal cars or break into cars or all these things, and it seems like there's no accountability. So the question here, how do you balance, I guess, those two sort of objectives, which I would say one is to maybe not send a 13, 15-year-old into a path of, where he's always justice involved, versus holding youth accountable too, because people definitely don't want to keep seeing their cars stolen over and over again by the same people, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's a really important question. I have 4 kids, and I kind of appreciate deeply that the last thing we should ever want to do is put any child into custody. And we want to avoid that at all costs. Nobody feels good about that. It's a failure on a lot of levels. We don't want that. I don't want that. And just thinking of my own kiddos, the idea of them being in custody, it makes you sick to your stomach. But that said, what I have heard from so many people in the community that I've been talking to is that, we've got a bunch of moms and dads out there working really hard and trying to just, make a living and put food on the table. And they, in some instances, they've got kiddos who are really out there doing problematic, bad things, breaking the law. And they're crying out for some accountability and for what I would call a consequence, because we can't let folks go out there and break into cars repeatedly without a consequence. We can't let people go out there and put guns in people's faces and commit carjackings without serious consequence. And so it is a hard balance to strike, but I think you have to do it. And I think we have to be oriented from a position of if you are out there putting people's lives at risk, stealing their property, kind of repeatedly involved in criminal activity, there has to be a consequence. And it has to be clear that there's going to be a consequence, because we also don't want it to be kind of this random thing where will they or won't they, it has to be very clear, because I think, these young kiddos who are out there who may be on the wrong path, they need to understand that there will be a consequence. It's not a question that there will be if you do these things. And so I think, it's imperative that we ensure that the criminal justice system is always operating with empathy and compassion, for sure. But at the same time, there has to be consequence and accountability for folks who are breaking the law repeatedly, for folks who are putting people's lives and safety at risk. And I think one of the things I've heard, and you read it in the papers, you hear it on the television, I've heard from so many victims and victims' families who tell me and who have said publicly, we're not being listened to. Our opinions don't matter. And that's just flat out wrong. And I think it really hurts the credibility of the county attorney's office. I think it hurts the credibility of our whole public safety system. Those crime victims' families have to feel heard. And again, doesn't mean that the prosecutor's going to do exactly what a crime victim or a crime victim's family wants, but they have to feel listened to. They have to feel valued. Their input matters. And I think as a prosecutor, as any public servant, frankly, but as a prosecutor in particular, you owe it to all these different people who are impacted to explain yourself. And frankly, that includes defendants. They should understand what position you're taking and why in terms of this is what should be done to your case. But crime victims' families, the public at large, everyone deserves to understand the why. Because if you don't, I think people lose trust. And I think that's what we've seen over the last few years.
Yeah. Well, I find it interesting. Every once in a while, a story will pop up about youth gangs.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to get a sense, like, how big an issue is it, right? Like, even like just taking, say, 38th in Chicago, for example.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, it's very hard for me to distinguish between rumor and fact around, say, what role gangs are taking in that neighborhood.
Sure.
Right? Do you have a sense, I mean, of what's going through the court? Like, how much of it is gang related and how much of it is just sort of someone who on their own sort of made some bad decisions?
Yeah, that is, I think that's a question that can only be answered kind of by looking at certain moments in time. And what I mean by that is things change kind of regularly. And I'll give you a good example. In the last few years, the U.S. Attorney's Office, so the federal prosecution office here in town, has gotten a lot of news for the emphasis they put on these RICO prosecutions, these racketeering cases against gangs. And there were North Minneapolis gangs and there were South Minneapolis gangs. And you saw large numbers of people being federally charged and then convicted of carrying out all sorts of violent crimes on behalf of the gang. And so, I think part of the answer to your question is we've seen in Minneapolis over the last number of years a large number of people convicted in courts of law for engaging in violent conduct on behalf of a gang, to benefit a gang. And so I think we certainly have a track record we can look at over the last few years and say we have a gang problem. Now, I think the other part of that is, some folks think about gangs as, there's like a hierarchy and there's almost like rank. And there was a time when I think that was true. I think what we're seeing right now over the last more recent history is a lot of these gangs or organized criminal groups have become kind of more neighborhood by neighborhood, have become a lot less formal in terms of structure. They're almost called cliques in some instances. And so, I think that is the changing face of organized crime in the country and certainly in the Twin Cities. And so do we have a gang problem in the Twin Cities? Well, the last few years would seem to indicate we do, just based on the number of people that have been charged and prosecuted and convicted in courts of law here for gang crimes to benefit a gang. And I think, the job of the county attorney, working with law enforcement, working with public safety professionals, working with neighborhoods, working with communities, organizers, working with, the faith leaders, the educators, all the people we've talked about. A good prosecutor should have his or her ear to the ground at all times so that we can kind of understand as things are changing what's coming up. Because, public safety is certainly benefited more by being proactive and stopping somebody or giving somebody an opportunity to get out of that lifestyle before they ever commit a crime. We don't want people to commit crimes. The goal here as a prosecutor is not to charge as many people as you can for, as many different things as you can. The goal is to prevent the crime to begin with. And so, it's a long answer to your question, but I think, with a good question like that, the fact of the matter is, yes, we've had a gang problem. We've taken steps to address it, but this is something we have to focus on every single day, because at any time we can kind of start trending in that direction, and we don't want that. We want to keep these folks out of the system at every cost.
So once they get into the system, the other side of it, right, is jail, or what the consequence is.
Yeah.
And I know they recently had to sue the Hennepin County, right, because they were overcrowding the jail here in town. What's the answer there, right? Because it feels like there's more people being charged and sent to prison than there's space for them. Do you have any ideas about, and I'm going to go ahead and throw in one of mine.
Yeah. Let me hear it.
Well, there's the Hennepin County Homeschool. It was,
Sure.
I think, actually a great program. I try and bring it up all the time. And I guess the philosophy changed from that kind of setting to more, we're going to do like smaller homes in the actual neighborhoods, or maybe even like ankle bracelets in the home kind of thing. Well, I don't know if there's good stats backing up that that's working well. It takes a whole organization to watch over the results. But the Hennepin County Homeschool was a great program, helping youth that were about to go back into society. And I don't know that in your position you get to direct any of this, but what happens once people get charged and convicted? What would you like to see occur?
Yeah, well, and let me tackle that kind of even before we get to the charged and convicted part, because what you're kind of bringing up is a really, I think, important part of the job of the Hennepin County Attorney, which is to be a good partner to the Hennepin County Sheriff, certainly, and also to the commissioners, to the electeds who run Hennepin County. And one of the things I'm most excited about is the opportunity to work with all of these stakeholders at the county level and really come up with a common vision for what public safety looks like, not just from a charging people with this crime and putting them into jail for this long, but a more holistic approach where we can say, what are the solutions that are potentially out there? What's the funding that it's going to take to get there? Because things like the homeschool and frankly, anything in the kind of criminal justice system, they all take money. And so I think part of what the Hennepin County Attorney can do and should do, if he or she's doing their job the right way, is working with all the other Hennepin County stakeholders collaboratively to educate folks on kind of what it is that can be done, what it's going to cost, and how we might have a shared vision of getting there. And I'm really excited about that opportunity because, again, I think it's a job the Hennepin County Attorney should have and should do, and I think we've lost a little bit of that over the last 4 years. To get to your question, though, I think criminal, almost everybody who's charged with a crime and convicted at some point is gonna be back out in the public, and we want to set those folks up for the maximum amount of success that we can. We want them to be employed. We want them to be in school. We want them to be parents. We want them to be involved in their families' lives. And so any solution that we're going to look at, or any kind of system we're going to prioritize, I always want to keep in mind that the goal here is when people get through the criminal justice system, when they've been held accountable, when they've had that consequence we talked about, that they're as well positioned as can be to get back on their feet and get back to being a productive member of our Hennepin County community. And so, I'm really open to anything that is geared towards that. And I'm excited to work with, again, the sheriff and the Hennepin County commissioners to really find some good solutions.
Have you had a chance to meet with any of them yet?
I have, and I would say it's kind of an ongoing process, but I have, and the folks I've talked to, have been great. And like the prosecutors at Hennepin County, these are all public servants who are putting themselves out there to try and make Hennepin County the best place it can be. And so it's I really enjoy talking to them.
So one of the other, I would say, somewhat controversial things Moriarty's done is brought in some outside legal assistance. When is that needed? When is it worth the expenditure to bring in outside legal help, do you think?
Well, if you're referring to this prosecution of the state trooper that her office later dismissed, I don't think it was needed there. Her own office could have made that clear to her, and I think this is an example of one time where it was not required. And
was that done because she wanted to give the impression that there was no bias in what they were doing, or what, or they just didn't feel they had the expertise, or why?
I don't think I can speak for the why. That's probably a better question for her office. But I will tell you, as the county attorney, you have to make hard decisions. And I've always told people, one of the hardest decisions as a prosecutor is saying no. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a crime victim who feels like they're not getting justice, whether it's a law enforcement officer who feels like you're not making a case you should make, or whether it's a prosecution perhaps you believe in your heart should be brought, but it's not the right case to bring. But you have to be able to say no, and you have to be willing to stand up and say no, and you have to be willing to follow the facts and apply the law. And I just don't think this is an instance with the state trooper where that happened. And it's good that they ultimately got to the right decision, but it shouldn't have been as hard or expensive for the taxpayers in Hennepin County as it was.
Well, you're certainly stepping up for a role that I think every county attorney has faced some big cases, a lot of heat, and so I don't know if there's any instances in your past career that you think prepare you for that sort of media attention or criticism that you're absolutely going to get at some point.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a great question. I think every case I've prosecuted, and frankly I've defended many cases, every case I've been involved in the criminal justice system prepares you in some way, because it equips you with that life experience that comes from, as a prosecutor, making a decision to charge someone with a crime and potentially take their liberty away if they're convicted. And as a defense lawyer, every case where you're standing next to somebody who's about to be sentenced, I tell people, you can literally almost hear your client's heart beating through their chest as they're waiting to hear the sentence of judge. These are powerful moments. I mean, this is kind of the most powerful moment in a lot of people's lives, because their freedom is at stake. Holding the mother of a crime victim is in your arms after a trial's completed is about as powerful an experience as you can get. I will tell you, to this day, I can see the picture of every single autopsy I've ever been part of as a prosecutor. You never stop seeing these images. And so I think all of those experiences prepare you for the hard decisions. But I will tell you, I signed Derek Chauvin's indictment charging him with violating George Floyd's civil rights based on Derek Chauvin's murder of George Floyd. And it shouldn't be forgotten that we charged Derek Chauvin federally with also violating a juvenile civil rights. That was an important case, and I think one that involved a lot of really deep thinking, and a lot of people had a lot of opinions about that. I think that prepared me for this job. I will tell you, my wife, who has put up with a lot over my career in public service, when we started dating, I was having a security system put into my apartment in Northeast Minneapolis by the U.S. Marshals because of threats that had been made against me by a group I was prosecuting. All of that lived experience, I think, prepares you for how important the job is, how important it is to do the job right, and how many people's lives are impacted by doing the job. And I try and carry all that with me, and I think I'll bring all that experience to this job.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that was a big case, obviously, one of the biggest. And that's happened a couple of times where it's been somewhat controversial in this office. Is like, do they allow the Hennepin County prosecutor to take it, or does it go to the federal level? And I mean, I know that's not something you have control over.
No, but it's a good point, though, because the county attorney should be a partner to all the other folks who are in that public safety, law enforcement, space, and certainly that includes the U.S. Attorney and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Certainly that includes the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. But really, you should be talking to the Attorney General regularly. You should be on the phone with the governor's staff as appropriate. You should be talking with all the chiefs of police throughout the suburbs of Hennepin County. I mean, I tell everybody, Minneapolis is the biggest city in Hennepin County, but it's not the only city in Hennepin County, and there are dozens of great chiefs of police out there, mayors, city council members, all throughout the county. And they all have to have a seat at the table, and you as the county attorney have to be in communication with all of them, and everybody has to be treated the same because their voices are all important. And you have to be the communicator in chief for the county attorney's office.
Well, and I would just throw in, I'm somewhat surprised sometimes by how many of the arrests and crimes that we see are actually committed by people who've come in from another surrounding city, right? So it's like, seems like whenever they catch someone for one of the bigger shooting, they're all big, but a shooting, a lot of times they're from outside the city.
Yeah.
There's nothing to stop them to. Well, and I don't know what that connection is, if they're just coming in for the nightlife or because this is where targets are. But your point about talking to the surrounding police chiefs and stuff makes sense to me because obviously people are traveling.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and it turns out it's not like the criminal who's on a track to do something bad is going to say, well, the Minneapolis city limits right here. I'm not going to step over into Edina or Richfield or St. Louis Park or Golden Valley or whatever. The boundaries are an artificial thing when it comes to public safety, and so. I want the chief of police in Minnetonka to be able to pick up the phone and call me and know I'm going to answer and hear him or her out, and we're going to get to the right place. I want everybody who's out on the western edge of Hennepin County, miles away from the office of the county attorney, to know that they're just as important as anybody who's closer in. Chief of police in Minneapolis, for example, like everybody's voice matters, and doing a good job in that public safety space. I don't care what your job is, whether you're a prosecutor, probation officer, a judge, the Hennepin County attorney, whatever. If you can bring humility, and if you can bring hard work, and if you can be willing to talk to anybody and listen, I think you can do the job really well. And that'll set you up for success. Because I think everybody in that space is pulling in the same direction, which is to say they want to increase public safety. They want to make people feel safe. They don't want people to have to look over their shoulder when they're walking down the street. They want people to feel safe in their communities. And if you're doing that, communicating and treating all the folks who are in that system the same way, you're a long way down the road to success, I think.
Well, great. Thank you for coming in and sharing all these thoughts. I know a lot of people are going to be watching this race for sure.
Yeah, seems like it.
Are there any items that we didn't cover that you wanted to touch on at all?
No, I don't think so. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you bringing me in, and it's been really fun to talk to you.
And how, if people want to find out more about you or any of your positions, how do they go about doing that?
Really easy. It's AndersFolk.com, www.andersfolk.com. That'll take you right to my website, and it'll have information on the race, information on me, on the campaign, how you can get in touch with us, and I look forward to chatting or meeting with anybody who wants to reach out and help.
And this odd side point is I find that an interesting last name, Folk. I don't know that I've ever met someone with that name.
A Folk?
Yeah. Is
there
a history there that you could share? Or?
Yeah, so it's my father's side of the family. It's kind of German in origin. Whether at one point it was with a V, I don't know. But we're my name kind of reflects my family in the sense that I have Norwegian ancestry, Anders, and German, which is the folk. And it's funny, actually, you say that. Other than my family, I've never met any other folks either. So, who knows? Maybe there's some out there.
Well, and I'm sure
Come
you've
find
dealt
me.
with a lot of jokes through your life with that. How are you folks doing?
Oh,
or whatever.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, when you're a middle school kid and your last name has 4 letters, and the first is F and the last is K.
Yeah.
There's
So
some tomfoolery.
Well, you know how to stand up for yourself, I guess.
Listen,
that,
it's
right?
battle
So
hardened from
things
middle
can
school.
prepare you. So.
Yeah, West Junior High.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Bye.